I think rewilding is all about giving our tired and beaten landscape another lease of life. Sometimes that means creating a little bit of space for nature to go on living, but on other, more rare occasions, we actually have the opportunity to hand back an entire area. And when we rise to the task and we set our aim high, we can put aside a whole chunk of the landscape that we no longer have any use for, where wilderness is ready to jump at the chance to take over. And, well, I think that if we can accelerate that handover, even by a little bit, then we are doing a pretty good job. And that is why this new project is so exciting.
Today I'm here in an abandoned quarry, which we are going to restore, and as you can see, it is a really strange landscape, but it has a lot of potential for biodiversity.
You see, large wetland ecosystems are extremely rare in this dry part of Portugal, because most water bodies in the region have been modified over the last few centuries and are in a really unnatural state. So when an abandoned quarry flooded in this region, it provided a unique opportunity for all kinds of species of plants, migratory birds, amphibians, and aquatic mammals. But unfortunately, the full return of wilderness to the area isn't a done deal, because much of the quarry still looks like this. Barren, steep walls with little to no vegetation or use for anything. Not to mention this weird light blue water in the middle there. It's only visible by drone, and we have our own theories on how it's formed, but I'm curious to hear what you think. My point is that the area is already really great for wildlife, but it could be better, especially when it comes to diversity.
Which is why our goal with this project is to modify the topography of this area, to increase and diversify the available wetland habitat, and create the best conditions for a wide variety of species. I think you're going to enjoy this one because we have all sorts of ambitious plans for this area, such as knocking down and smoothing these steep banks, connecting and blocking ponds to create different kinds of habitats, and even creating islands in the middle of these areas here to provide crucial breeding habitat for wetland birds.
And in this video today, I want to show you around the area, tell you what we have planned, and of course, show you the progress we've made so far. Now, let's start by looking at this absolute mess of a place. This site was formerly known as Quinta de Santa Margarida, and it was an open pit mine, which, according to my research, first started operations in the 1930s. They mined for tin and titanium until 1991, and then for feldspar and quartz until 2004. When the mining finally ceased after more than 80 years of activity. Since then, it's been out of use and mostly abandoned, which meant that over time it started to slowly flood and overgrow with vegetation, creating this insane wetland that we now want to improve. Well, when I say we, it would be very incomplete without Rewilding Portugal, one of our oldest partners. They were the ones who first saw the potential of this area and are now managing the land to improve it, which is of course how we came to work on this exciting project. Today, I'm being shown around the area by Tiago, the biologist in charge of the mossy earth side of things for this project, who also happens to be my brother.
So what I really like about this landscape is that although it used to be an ugly quarry, now it has become a bit of a pond wonderland with little ponds dotted all over the place.
Wonderland is almost an understatement. Here you'll find incredibly steep banks, lakes of different sizes, small islands with trees on them, abandoned houses, and weird ponds like this one, sitting 4 meters above another one, right next to it.
I must say that walking through this area is really strange because these cliffs are bizarre. They don't really stand in a natural way as you would if you would have cliffs near the shore. They're just a wall of what looks like sand, essentially. And that is, of course, because this is a really artificial area and you can feel it. It feels very different from anything else you get elsewhere.
Exploring the area made me feel like a kid. You are always going up and down and never really knowing what is around the next corner. The miners here dug in a very strange pattern, or well, maybe in no pattern at all. And this makes it feel like a strangely organic maze of water, sand, and vegetation. Places like this excite me, areas with intense human use which suddenly find a new lease of life. And I think nature is not picky. It will take what we can give. But this blasted landscape isn't like most other patches of dirt that we leave behind. This one is full of water, and that means it has great practical value. In a region where most places with water have been heavily modified, a place like this is a rare and precious thing. Now, I'll admit, of course, this place is actually modified to the extreme, but it holds a lot of water, which cannot be said about many of the other areas we leave behind. Add to that the crazy patterns of the miners, and we have one of the most important conditions for thriving biodiversity, which of course is habitat diversity. This place is full of amazing features for wildlife. Have a look. All this freshwater habitat is great for fish, reptiles and amphibians. Here you'll find different depths of water, permanent ponds, and crucially also temporary ponds, which dry up in the summer, creating rare ephemeral habitats, which are really important to a range of species that have evolved to live only in those conditions. The trees and abundant vegetation provide great places for birds, which combined with the water and the abundance of prey is pretty much like an all-inclusive resort for them. And there are even these little islands here, where the birds can nest in relative safety. So far, more than 115 species have been observed and identified. In my quick visit, I saw herons, a circling red kite, and the small birds which I couldn't identify because they were hiding in the reeds. However, the ideal season for this is spring, and you can bet I'll be back here to film an absolute bird fest of a video for you. Then, in the different lakes, otters can also be spotted. Tiago had a bizarrely close encounter with them during his last visit. Now, you've heard me go on about how amazing this place is. So why are we then spending 36,000 euros on a project to improve it? Well, we're essentially here to make it even better, and to do so in a much shorter time frame than nature ever could. We are here to speed up that handover. Now, before we start our projects, we always like to have baselines, because good projects are grounded on a solid results-based approach, so that we can understand how things are and what impacts our actions will have over time. Otherwise, we're working in the dark. For this area, we are taking 3 different types of baselines. We will start by conducting a survey on the abundance of various species to get a reasonable estimate of what is there before we start. Then, we're also collecting water samples to run an eDNA analysis of both vertebrate and invertebrate species in the different lakes. This is some amazing technology. We can filter just a bit of water and detect the small bits of DNA from all kinds of species which are hard or even impossible to detect with surveys. This allows us to understand which species live where, and if some lakes have certain species and others don't. And if we detect certain invasive species in one area, we will know we should not connect it to healthier areas. It has many such uses. As you can see, it was not easy to collect, but it's well worth getting done before starting the project.
Então, como é que é a situação, Sara?
Bom, estou mesmo no lodo.
And finally, the team also collected a large orthophoto mosaic of the whole area to map the change in ecosystem types. This is not the one, it's one from another area we work in, because we haven't finished the one from the quarry, as it's really big. As you can see, this is essentially a detailed drone photo that is created with a pre-planned flight. We use this in many of our projects, and it is a very useful way to track changes over time. We've even used algorithms to detect unique species and their distribution. I can't stress how cool this stuff is. If you remember, once we have the results for these baselines, they will be added to your account, so you can also track changes over time. I'll also refer back to them in future videos, as I'm sure they'll be really useful to tell this story. For now, we are releasing the management plan for the project, as usual, so you can dig into all the sources and the methodologies behind what we are doing. And if you have no clue what being a member is, then be sure to check out our website and some of our other videos, because we essentially fund all of this work with contributions of people like yourself who watch this video and then decide to contribute monthly to our projects. So you can check out mossy.earth to learn all about the different ecosystems we work in and the different projects that we are implementing. The link is in the description below. Now let's get into the actual interventions. The first and most obvious intervention will be to smoothen the steep banks, to create a gradient of habitats. And the best place to show you is here, where we have both a smooth bank and a steep bank. I'll let Tiago explain.
So here it's really interesting because we have the steep banks in the background there, where it's so steep that you don't have any diversity of conditions, and so the vegetation is all pretty similar. While if we look at where we're standing now, we actually have a smooth slope. And as you can see, if you progress from the lake to where we are, we have these reeds here, and then we start having like different types of vegetation all the way to the background there. And it's this kind of diversity of habitats and conditions that we really want to promote, and that we hope that by smoothing the banks in different places, we will be able to see more of this type of habitat and of this diversity in the area.
And some of these steep banks will also be left as they are, because they can be useful for certain birds to nest in. Ultimately, this part of the work is all about diversity. A diversity of water depths will mean the areas are dry and wet at different times of the year and create a wide range of conditions, which also leads to a diversity of habitats, which in turn supports a diversity of species. I'm sure you'll get real tired of that word before the end of this video, but it's what we are doing here. Our second intervention type focuses on increasing the flooding and creating the right conditions for a very unique pond ecosystem called the Mediterranean temporary ponds. The work on this actually started a couple of weeks ago, and Tiago managed to film some bits, so I'll let him show you around.
So the goal for the section behind me is to stimulate the appearance of Mediterranean temporary ponds. And these are ponds that dry in the summer, and they're very important because there's a range of species that have actually evolved to take advantage of this ephemeral habitat. And so the way to do this here will be to block this bit of channel here so that we have more water accumulating in the flat bit behind me. And so if all goes well, we'll have a few Mediterranean temporary ponds dotting the landscape behind me. And it will be very exciting. I've been reading about these ponds for a long time now, and I'm really interested in this habitat. So if we manage to create some here, that will make me very happy. And it will be amazing to come back and see what it all looks like. And some of the species that take advantage of this habitat are amphibians, because one of the features of these ponds is that because they dry out in the summer, they don't have fish. So that means that the amphibians can lay their eggs and they are safe from predation from these fish. So yeah, it's a special habitat, and it'll be very interesting to see what it looks like once it rains and we start seeing them dotting the landscape here.
The first ditches have already been blocked, and Tiago has been showing me a ton of different earth movements just in one small area of the project. I have this whole management plan I've been looking at, and I visited the sites and I'm still confused. So I think that before this gets really messy for you, we should take to the air and get a more simplified overview of this initial part of the project. So this area here is the first one we will work on. It's here at the tip of the quarry, and in this one shot you can see several interventions. Here in the back we are blocking an old drainage pipe to increase flooding and retention. And here we are smoothing a bank to help spread the flooding to this area here. Then in the middle we're smoothing that really tall bank to flood this really big area over here. And in the middle, in this part, we are blocking those channels to create the temporary ponds that Tiago is so keen to see. And then in this area we're doing nothing, because it is also important to know when you should step back.
So one thing that's very important is that we are leaving some areas untouched. So where I'm standing now, you can see that there's actually a great diversity of habitats already. Areas with different depths, different types of vegetation. And so here we don't want to do anything. We don't want to interfere. We want to let nature take its course. And it seems to be already on its way to restoration since the site was abandoned and mining activities stopped.
In addition to these initial earth movements, we're also looking at reintroducing and propagating different native plant species, improving certain water passages to increase the water quality, and my favorite, creating small islands in the lakes for the birds to nest on. But those are all stories for upcoming videos, when we get started on those interventions, because I think that each one has a story to tell, and I don't want to rush them. I'm really excited to show you how this unique project evolves as we transform this area over time and let nature fully take over. So keep an eye out for more project updates in the spring. And of course, the best way to do that is to subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, it will be great as well with once the earth movements are done, to start seeing like how the ecosystem evolves. I think that'll be very exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how things will turn out this spring once all the earth movements are complete and once the wildlife starts returning, especially the birds, because I got this big lens now, so I can finally go take some really cool shots of these birds. So I can't wait to show you all the wildlife that uses this quarry. And yeah, if this project is something that you think is worth supporting, then please consider becoming a Mossy Earth member. You can do so by heading over to our website at mossy.earth. Until next time, cheers!